I don't know about you, but I personally find interviews extremely stressful. But part of having a good interview is knowing exactly what to expect on the day. In this video, I'm going to walk you through step by step the oral part of the ARB Prescribed exam. All right, let's go. When you take the ARB Prescribed exam, there are usually two phases to the whole process. Phase 1 is when you submit all the forms that prove your eligibility to take the exam. This is also the phase where you submit the comparative matrix and where you pay the fee. Once the ARB had the time to assess your application and have established that you are in fact eligible to take the exam, then you move on to phase 2. Phase 2 is when you receive an invitation email with the date of your exam and with a couple of links. The first one is the Zoom meeting to attend your oral exam, and the second one is a link to upload all your evidence, aka your portfolio, by a certain date and time. You will usually be interviewed on the day by a panel of architecture professionals, some of them academics, some of them do office-based work, and there are usually four of them plus an external examiner who is there to only make sure that the examination process is being fair. The interview is an opportunity for you to either point the jury towards a piece of evidence that they might have missed, or to provide oral evidence to a criterion or part of a criterion that you haven't fully covered as part of your portfolio. So on the day, the members of the jury will come with a record sheet with all the criteria listed, with checks against the criteria that have been satisfied according to them, and the criteria that they don't believe you've clearly covered in your portfolio. And the examination, from my own experience, goes like this. They literally read out loud to you the criterion that they don't think you have fully satisfied, and they ask you to point them towards the evidence in your portfolio where you think you satisfied that criterion by sharing your screen and showing them. So a few things that I think would really help to answer these questions properly. The first one is to make sure that you have the table of your comparative matrix printed and right next to you on the day of the exam. This way, when they ask you a question about a specific criterion, you can straight away go to your table and find in which projects you have marked that you have satisfied that criterion. And that way, it'll be easy for you to go on your screen on your computer, open up that project, and then show them the evidence. The second one is to separate your project into different PDF files and to have them all opened on your screen on the first page. And that way, it'll be easier to jump between projects rather than have them all in one PDF where you need to kind of scroll up and down and try to find the evidence on the spot. The third point is to make sure that you point the jury towards at least two different instances where you think you meet the criteria. Make sure you open the project, introduce it very briefly to give the context, and jump straight to the evidence. After you do, there are two scenarios that can play out on the day. The first one is that they either move on to another question. They might nod or give you like a subtle hint that they're satisfied with your answer, and they might not. But they move on to the next question. That means, and there are no follow-up questions, that means that they're happy and you're good. Or they ask you follow-up questions on the answer that you have given them. And in that case, it means that they're not 100% convinced with the evidence that you have pointed out, and they need a little bit more from you. And if that happens, you have two choices. You can either think of the answer in your appendices, and you can try and point them towards that information and explain briefly the context of it. There's a lot of information in the appendices that you don't necessarily have in your drawn part of your portfolio, but it could be important evidence that will convince them of your answer. So for example, if they ask you a follow-up question about health and safety, and you don't have anything about health and safety in your main portfolio, but you have, say, a construction phase document in your appendices, then you can point them to that document and explain briefly the context in which you produced that document, and hopefully that will answer the question. Or the other option is to give them a verbal answer to their question that is kind of like from your experience, that it's not something that you're presenting on the day, it's not something that you have in your portfolio, but it's something from your own experience. So in this case, I would advise you to completely detach yourself from the portfolio, because fine, the answer is not in the portfolio, the answer is not in the appendices, but you can definitely give an answer from your own knowledge and your own experience, and that verbal answer will be considered evidence. So for example, they ask you about construction trends, and your portfolio is from a long time ago and there isn't anything trendy in your portfolio. You can say, I haven't been particularly involved in this, but I've been following closely a project in the office where we're using off-site construction in this new school, and then you can expand a little bit on this. So don't feel like you're constrained to whatever you have presented in your portfolio and your appendices. This is an oral exam, and so any verbal information that you're giving them on the day can absolutely be considered as evidence. Before we carry on, I have a favor to ask. If you're enjoying the content of this video, make sure you subscribe and like, because this will allow this information to reach a much larger audience and many more people to benefit from this information. Thank you. All right, so let's say you did all of this, you followed all this advice, but on the day, unfortunately, the nerves got the best of you and you weren't able to answer properly a question or a part of a question, and that's it. The interview is finished and you kind of missed your chance to answer the question. Okay, first of all, don't panic. At the discretion of the jury, you might be offered a referral to the external examiner. What does that mean? It means that you don't have to resit the exam necessarily, but you have an opportunity to answer that criterion or a couple of criteria that you have missed through a written submission that you submit to the external examiner, and you have about 1 year to do it for a much reduced fee than the fee of the exam. So there are a few conditions for this. First, you need to pay a fee. And second, you need to have satisfied all the criteria in GC1 and an additional 32 criteria. Okay, this is where it can get a little bit confusing. If there are only 33 criteria, how does the math work? The heading of the general criteria counts as 1 mark, and it cannot be obtained unless you satisfy all the criteria in that heading. So, for example, if you satisfy a GC 1.1, GC 1.2, GC 1.3, you will receive 1 mark for each of these, plus an additional mark for the general heading. So this makes the total score 44 rather than 33. So to phrase this better, I guess, to be referred to the lead examiner, you need to satisfy all the criteria for GC1 and get an additional 32 points, 32 marks. Finally, after your interview, the results can take up to 2 weeks to come through the email. And I know it's easier said than done, but try not to worry about it. It's out of your hands now. You did your best, and there's nothing you can do. You can only wait for the results. Hopefully you'll get some great news, but even if you don't, in the worst case scenario, remember that you can take the exam up to 3 times. And the regulation is changing all the time, so hopefully in a few years it'll be much easier to convert your diploma in the UK. I hope this video was helpful. Let me know in the comments down below if you found this useful. If you want to learn more about how to choose your projects for the ARB Prescribed exam, I made a video up here where I go into a deep dive into the comparative matrix and how to choose your projects. Yeah, well, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching the video, and don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.